Texas once led the world in cattle, but now the U.S. herd is the smallest since 1951, and beef prices just shattered all records. Ranchers are selling off cows, feedlots sit half empty, and a sudden border shutdown has left the state reeling. The governor of Texas faces mounting pressure, yet nobody saw how this crisis would spiral out of control. How did it all unravel so fast? The U.S. cattle herd stands at 86.7 million head, the smallest national inventory recorded since 1951. In Texas, the numbers are stark. 12.2 million cattle and calves remain, making up about 14% of the entire country's herd. Of those, just over 4 million are beef cattle, an industry pillar that once seemed unshakable. Yet, as supplies have tightened, prices have soared to levels never seen before. In July 2025, ground beef reached a record $6.25 per pound at retail, stretching household budgets and pushing beef toward luxury status for many families. On the production side, fed cattle prices peaked at $245 per hundredweight in the fall of 2025. Steers averaged $242 per hundredweight, a 27% jump compared to the previous year. These are not just numbers. They are the highest prices ever paid for American cattle. Despite the turmoil, Texas still leads the nation in total cattle, but the margin is shrinking. Every one of these figures tells the same story. The supply is at its tightest in more than 70 years, while the cost of beef for both producers and consumers climbs higher. The pressure is mounting on every link in the chain, from ranch to grocery store, as the consequences of shrinking herds and record demand ripple outward. Governor Greg Abbott stood before reporters in Austin, his voice steady, but the frustration clear. Days earlier, federal authorities had ordered a halt to all Mexican cattle imports at the Texas border. The move, announced May 11th, 2025, came as the New World screwworm swept north through Mexico, threatening to undo decades of eradication work. For Texas, the closure struck at the heart of its cattle system. In a typical year, over 1 million head cross from Mexico into the state, vital for feed yards that rely on a steady inflow to keep pens full and costs manageable. Now, with the border sealed, only 250,000 head managed to enter in 2025, a fraction of the usual flow. Abbott called the decision devastating for rural Texas. He cited figures showing Mexican imports account for nearly 1 in 5 cattle placed in panhandle feed yards. Without those animals, feed yards across the region dropped to 70% capacity, leaving empty pens and idled workers. The shortage sent shockwaves through the market, adding $30 per hundredweight to cattle prices almost overnight. For ranchers and feeders already battered by drought and wildfire, the border shutdown felt like a final blow. The governor pressed the federal government for a clearer timeline and more flexibility, but animal health officials insisted the risk of reintroducing screwworm to Texas was too great. In public statements, Abbott warned that the economic cost of the closure could outlast the disease threat itself. He pointed to state agriculture releases and APHIS bulletins, demanding better coordination and support for ranchers caught in the crossfire. As the weeks dragged on, the pain rippled outward, from the empty feed yards of the Panhandle to the grocery stores where record beef prices showed no sign of falling. Cole Bolton stands at the edge of his pasture, eyes on the thinning herd he has managed for decades. For him, the numbers never add up. Feed costs climb, fuel bills double, and every year the margin shrinks a little more. He talks about 20 years of scraping by, watching the share of the beef dollar paid to ranchers fall from over half to barely a third. Bolton's operation, like so many others, has weathered too many years of drought and fire to count. He wonders aloud how much longer he can keep going. On Turkey Track Ranch, the devastation is everywhere. 80% of its 80,000 acres burned in the Smokehouse Creek Fire. Fences are gone, grass is blackened, and the cattle, thousands, were lost to flames or were put down after days of agony. Ranch hands who stayed through the fire remember the silence after, broken only by the sound of trucks hauling away what was left. At the Decatur livestock market, the lines stretch for miles. Ranchers wait in their pickups, trailers loaded with cattle they never meant to sell. Some, like Brian Lewensman from Seguin, send calves to auction months too soon, forced by empty tanks and scorched fields. Each sale is a piece of a legacy slipping away, and for many, the hope of rebuilding grows fainter with every passing season. 2011, Texas faced the worst single-year drought in its history. Statewide agricultural losses reached $7.6 billion, with livestock accounting for nearly half that total. Ranchers, unable to find enough grass or water, sold off more than 1 million cattle, many shipped out of state in a desperate bid to survive. The Texas beef cow herd plunged from about 5.1 million to under 4 million head, and even years later, those numbers never fully recovered. Just over a decade later, another wave hit. The 2022 drought forced ranchers to liquidate 2.66 million cattle, the highest cull in a decade. Weekly beef cow slaughter soared to 80,000 head, echoing the grim pace of 2011. Breeding stock, cows meant to produce future generations, were sent to market, locking in a smaller calf crop for years to come. According to Texas A&M economists, these repeated shocks have made it nearly impossible for the state to rebuild its herd. Each drought leaves fewer cattle, older ranchers, and less margin for error. As a result, the Texas cattle system enters every new disaster with less resilience than before. The Smokehouse Creek Fire swept across over 1 million acres in the Texas Panhandle, a scale unmatched in the state's history. Hemphill County alone lost 400,000 acres, with entire pastures reduced to ash and thousands of cattle dead or dying. County officials described the aftermath as overwhelming. Carcasses scattered for miles, fencing gone, water sources contaminated. Early estimates confirmed at least 7,000 cattle lost, with some counts reaching 10,000 when injuries forced mass euthanasia. The Panhandle and High Plains are home to the largest concentration of Texas beef cattle and feedlot capacity, making this region the backbone of the state's cattle industry. When disaster strikes here, the impact ripples far beyond local boundaries. The fire did not just destroy land and animals, it struck at the heart of Texas's beef supply, compounding losses at a time when herds were already at historic lows. 4 companies, Tyson, JBS, Cargill, and National Beef, control 85% of the U.S. beef market, a level of control that shapes every transaction from ranch to retailer. Over the past decade, the rancher's share of each beef dollar has dropped from 60 cents to just 37 cents, while packer profit margins have soared by 400% since 2015. Legal settlements followed. Tyson and Cargill together paid $87.5 million to resolve price-fixing claims, and JBS added $52.5 million more. But settlements offer little comfort in towns like Amarillo. Tyson decided to cut 1,761 jobs at its beef plant. That followed the earlier closure of Cargill's Plainview facility and 2,000 lost jobs. Entire communities are reeling. Meanwhile, the average Texas rancher is now 60 years old. Operators over 65 outnumber those under 35 by 6 to 1. Starting a ranch today demands an asset base of nearly $1.9 million just to gross $50,000. That barrier keeps younger generations out, and it helped drive the loss of 17,700 farms and 1.6 million acres since 2017. An antitrust expert points to the systemic bottleneck. As packers consolidate and plants shutter, aging ranchers face fewer buyers, shrinking options, and a system increasingly tilted away from those who produce the beef. CattleFacts economist Kevin Good lays out the reality. Rebuilding the Texas herd is a slow process, with no shortcuts. Even if ranchers retain more heifers and weather finally cooperates, biology dictates an 18 to 24-month lag before the first new calves reach market. Nationally, projections call for the United States herd to add just 1 million head over the next 3 years, a far cry from earlier recoveries that added 1 million head each year. High prices are expected to persist well into 2026, putting both beef and the future of Texas ranching at a crossroads. Policy staff at the Texas Department of Agriculture point to a menu of options: disaster relief for wildfire and drought victims, incentives for young and beginning ranchers, and stronger antitrust enforcement to level the playing field. Each decision now will shape whether the next generation of ranchers has a herd to rebuild or a legacy to let go. Today, Texas beef herds remain at their lowest in decades, while prices keep climbing. As droughts, wildfires, and market power squeeze ranchers, the choices made now will shape America's food supply for years. The future of Texas beef, and those who raise it, hangs in the balance.